Kia ora koutou and welcome to the behind the scenes documentary for 3-minute board games. So there's an awful lot of things I'm going to kind of skip over in this video because if I was to cover the whole process, it would take multiple days of video and no one wants to watch that. So things like receiving the game in the mail, unboxing it, reading the rulebook in bed, reading the rulebook on the toilet, all that stuff I'm not going to film. Yes, you can breathe a sigh of relief, you're not going to see those things. What I'm going to show is the photographic process, the script writing process, the audio recording, audio editing process, and the video editing processes. Now that's a hell of a lot of stuff to show, and the video is going to be quite long, but that's the point of this, that people wanted to see how a video got made, so I'm putting as much of that forward as I possibly can. Our videos are made possible because of our support on Patreon. I'd like to thank all our Patreon supporters for their ongoing support, and our patron of the video is Emil Anderson. Thank you, Emil, for your ongoing support for the channel. Thank you kindly. So after unboxing and then reading the rulebook, the next thing I do is set up the game and just give it a bit of a playthrough. It's not a proper play, it's just kind of mucking about with the bits and pieces to learn the game on the table. So the thing with World of Tanks is that it has a 3x3 grid you play on, and I happen to have one of those from another game, so I'm just going to use that as the board for this. The game doesn't actually come with this. I also have Mike turning up in about an hour's time to actually play the game with me for the first time, so next time you see this, it's going to look pretty similar.
One of the things about playtesting games, we do play the games all the way through and I take notes and we discuss them afterwards. I try to play most games 5 times, but some you don't really need to play that much to figure them out. Our World of Tanks ended up playing 4 scenarios and that was really enough for me to know what the game was about. One of the things I really need to point out is the number of people I get into test games. I have a large group of people that I can tap on the shoulder and invite to different test games, and they really make a huge difference to the channel. One of the secret things about 3-minute board games is how much of their advice and feedback actually makes its way into the reviews. So when I'm saying things like, you might not like this if, that's sometimes exactly what someone has said to me after a game. It's not just me plucking stuff out of the air. After we've tested the game, the next step is just to think about how we're going to focus the video. What parts of the game really need to be spotlighted in order to get the most information across as possible. And I go into the photo shoot with that idea in mind. So one of the weird things about this particular photo shoot is we did it on location at the Upper Hut Wargaming Club. The reason for that is I wanted to borrow a bunch of models for the video. On the plus side, this actually made it a lot easier for Steph to actually film me while I was taking photos because the room we normally shoot in is quite cramped. So I just used 2 standard lights for this photo shoot, and it wasn't particularly fantastic lighting, but when you're shooting remotely, you do the best you can. Normally I have a 3rd light on the other side, but just couldn't do that. Now here we're setting up the stop motion for the introduction sequence, and what I tend to do is set up the whole shot, take one still photo, and then remove an element, and then take the next photo. So it's snap, remove, remove. A lot of the shots we do are high angle, just shooting down, but sometimes I like to take low angle shots. You just take the camera off the table, bring it down, make sure it's not gonna get too ridiculously out of focus at that range, and just try to get the best shot you can. Have to adjust the lighting as well to make sure that everything's still well lit. Alright, and here we are setting up for the main sort of action sequence shots, where I set up the game and I go through a whole bunch of the rules bit by bit. Ideally, I want these scenarios to look as much like a real game as possible. That's why I borrowed these painted tanks for this one, because the core set only came with one of each model of tank. And I thought the game would look a lot better if we had the full scale of the 5-on-5 that the game's supposed to be like. So a lot of what we do is just basic stop motion. It's a tank by a card, and then we take the card away, so that when we're doing the effects later on, so we can show the picture of the tank and then we can show the picture of the card turning up alongside the tank. And for every game I like to do a glamour shot or two where I get a lot of the best looking components. I'll arrange them in such a way that it's a sort of stylistic shot, whether it's showing a lot of cards displayed or a lot of models or whatever it is. I try to get at least a couple of stylized promo shots that can be put up on websites and other places. And for World of Tanks, I decided, what's the highlight of World of Tanks? It's the tanks. So let's do a big tableau of awesome looking tanks. As far as technical elements go, I tend to shoot auto. I tend to use the auto function on my camera as much as humanly possible. I am not a trained photographer, so a lot of it I fix up with Photoshop later.
I'm just going to swing this back around because yeah, the tripod's currently in use, so I can't really mount the camera and talk to it properly. But this is how we normally do static photos. Camera here, tripod, lighting, then we go on to Photoshop.
Okay, so once we've taken all the photos in the photo shoot and copied them across to the computer, we can start editing them. Here's my file system. I fastidiously keep everything that's ever been connected to 3-minute board games in any way, shape or form. So we jump into my working folder, we can jump to the offline storage archive, and you can see there are folders here for every single game I've ever done. Bring up Gaia Project, there's all the Gaia Project pictures. There's the Gaia Project audio file and the script. And what this means is if somehow I lose all my videos, I can recreate them if I need to. And I can also use the pictures again anytime I need to make a compilation video. So in here I have something like, oh, let's have a check. Yeah, 16,000 odd files. Most of those are photos of games that I've already covered. So it's like a huge resource. At some point I'd like to get them all online into some repository so people can actually just use them as a sort of Creative Commons kind of image. But that's a lot of files to upload and a lot of storage, so I'm not entirely too sure what to do with that. If anyone's got any great ideas for that, just let me know in the comments. I also keep every single one of our finished videos. So come through here. This is all of the videos we've ever recorded are stored in OneDrive. And again, that's reassuring because it means that if YouTube fails or YouTube disappears on me or there's another platform, I can just go boom, upload all my stuff. And that's kept in offline storage as well. And we back that up every now and then. So yay. One thing I recommend if you are making content, keep your stuff if you can, because you never know when you can go back to it and reutilize it. It also just a little bit of security. So we're going to jump into our working folder. I tend to keep a chunk of, I tend to keep a lot of the most recent files in here. So we're just going to jump into World of Tanks. That's the game we're doing. I've already copied the originals, which is the JPEG images taken by the camera, into this file. And then we're going to open up all of the Photoshop files and load them into Photoshop. So just drag and drop these in. And my photography is not very good. But straight out, I'm not a trained photographer. I really don't know how to take photos. I've kind of been learning on the job. What I have learned is that I can muck about in Photoshop and correct an awful lot of errors. So one thing tends to happen is because of the black background, things get a little washed out at times. So what we're going to do is just increase the exposure on here a bit, get rid of some of that haze, and then we'll just drop the blacks in the background down a fair bit so that so we're not losing too much color from the cards, but that the background is sufficiently black. And when you check against what that sort of thing looks like before and after, you can see how much Photoshop saves my ass from being a terrible photographer. A lot of photos in this set will have similar settings, so what we'll do is we'll copy those editing settings and we'll paste them along with that. So this whole series, you can see the evolution. Some photos don't really need a huge amount of work, but we'll just up the exposure on that one so it's a little bit lighter to read. And yeah, I just do this process for every single photo. So it's a case of getting them so that the background is sufficiently black enough that it looks like a black background. It looks like it's digitally black, but without darkening or obscuring the content of the photos. And the reason for that is it just makes the transitions and stuff a lot easier. So if you take this picture and then we look at the unedited one, so we'll copy those, paste those editing settings, and this one probably needs to go more black in the background just because there's more color with the tanks. So that changes the complexion of that. So you still need to go through and fiddle with absolutely each of the photos. But this is how you do a traditional 3-minute board games transition shot. You take one photo, you take the other photo, and then use video effects to blend them all together. I'm just gonna keep plodding through these, and we'll put this on like ultra fast speed or something. I'll pop back in if I've got anything else relevant to say. One other thing to note is this shoot was on location, so I couldn't control the lighting quite as well as normal. So these pictures are actually a little more rough than they normally are. So they're normally a little bit better because I shoot in a closed room, which I'll show you, because no doubt I'll have to do a second photo shoot to cover up any gaps in this one. And sometimes I do like close-ups, so this picture here is just going to end up getting cropped out for its initiative symbol, and that's just going to end up in the top of a screen somewhere or the bottom of a screen somewhere just to highlight something. So for these ones, I'm not too fussed about how they look as long as the letters and numbers are legible. Shooting black on black's a really bad idea, by the way, just FYI. I really should have taken a different mat for the black cards. Once all those are done, we save them, and that's the preliminary photo edit done. Then we just tidy up the files. I take the original Photoshop files and put them in a different folder, and I get rid of the XMP files which track the changes, and what we have now is a folder with the majority of the photos we're going to use. So the next step is writing the script, and we'll do that pretty much straight away. So with the script, I've pretty much been using the same template for 3-minute board games since the beginning. I think I changed it after like 2 months slightly, but fundamentally it's the same file. And what this is it's a trick I use to limit the amount of writing space I've got for each section. And what this does is it sort of hard codes me into keeping the right amount of words. If I start blowing up one of these boxes, the script's going to be too long, or I'm spending too much time on the wrong thing. And how we write the script, most people would assume that we'd write the script and then shoot the video, shoot the photos, but we actually do it the other way around. I shoot the photos while thinking in my head what I'm going to roughly write. But because I've got concrete examples in the photos, you know, about where the position of something is, what a dice roll is, I can then reference those dice rolls and the position on the board and the game status and just use that in the script. So that's kind of why I do it that way. So yeah, we'll have a crack at writing a script and see how that goes. So yeah, I include disclaimers about whether something I get's a review copy or whether it's a New Zealand company that I'm supporting principally because it's a New Zealand company, or if it's a prototype copy for something. It takes me 2 seconds or less to say these things, and it just gives everyone on the channel immediate idea of, you know, where I got the copy from. Did I buy it myself? Did I back it? Was I sent it? Was it a review copy? If that matters to you, you know, I give that information out, and it's barely an inconvenience. Okay, I'm not going to screen capture the whole... Okay, I'm not going to screen capture the whole script writing process because this takes ages and it's probably not that particularly interesting to watch how every single word comes together. Plus it's making me nervous. So I'll come back to this when the script's closer to being done. So we're back and the script is done, and you'll notice I'm wearing a different shirt because, you know, this took a while and it's another day. So right now we've got a finished script, so what that means is I'm going to have to record the audio for it with a camera watching, and this, out of all parts of this behind the scenes documentary, is the bit that has been filling me with dread. Let's give it a go. So I record with the Blue Yeti microphone that a friend of mine, Paul Cowan, gave me. Thanks, Paul. Paul's a Patreon supporter, and my early videos had terrible audio quality, and so he sent me his spare Blue Yeti, and I've used it ever since. It's been a wonderful inclusion for the channel. So one thing about doing these bits to the microphone, the audio recording, is you gotta stay hydrated big time, because shouting at this thing, it just dries out your mouth real quick. One thing you'll also note when I'm doing this is I don't really do bloopers. So just had to do some wrangling because there were cables in the way. And yeah, I use a pop filter. I don't have a stand for the pop filter, I just kind of hold it in front of the microphone. But yeah, we're just going to do this audio recording as I do it normally. Straight, just one take pretty much. And if I stuff up, I go back to the previous line. So here we go. So I leave a quiet couple of seconds at the start of the track just to get a background noise. You'll see why later. Kia ora koutou and welcome to World of Tanks in about 3 minutes. Review copy used. There is no solo mode. It's a game for 2 players, playing time is medium, and it's a pretty simple game. It's World War II, the largest and most devastating war in human history. You are a tank commander in this conflict, leading a squadron of tanks into battle. Can you maneuver your forces into position and deliver a decisive blow to your opponents? The winner of this game is determined by what scenario you are playing. It can be eliminating the other players. It can be eliminating the other player's tanks or capturing and holding objectives. Asymmetry. Each tank has different abilities, strengths, and weaknesses. Points. Each tank and upgrade has a points cost, and the game has a points limit. Dice. Conflict resolution in this game is decided by dice. Player turn. Before the game begins, you will take turns setting up the terrain and picking which side you will deploy on. The starter box comes with the 4 tanks shown here and is expandable, but in order to show you the full scale of the game, I will be using models from the same other models from the same manufacturer. The game is played on a 3-foot square. It comes with a measuring stick. It comes with a measuring stick. Deploy all your tanks up to 1 length into the field of play. Each player rolls 3 dice for advantage. The winner is the player with the most critical symbols. Advantage means you win ties on this round. Movement is first, starting with the tanks. Movement is first, with the tanks with the lowest initiative moving first. A tank moves by placing the measuring stick against the tank, and then replacing the tank so it is touching the stick flat. You can position the tank on any side as long as it's touching. Do this as many times as your tank's mobility score. Place a marker to show how many times you have moved. Next is the shooting phase, and the tanks with the higher initiative shoot first. Tanks can shoot at anything on the board they can see. Buildings and woods and buildings block line of sight, so these 2 tanks cannot see each other. Woods, hills, walls, and buildings provide cover, and this tank is in the open. This Cromwell fires first. It has 4 firepower, so rolls 4 dice, getting a critical and 2 hits. The PZ4 has 1 survivability, so it gets 1 defense die. Both tanks move 2, therefore the defender gets 4 more defense dice. Finally, it loses 1 for being shot on the side. If it was in cover, it would gain 1 defense die. If it was in cover, it would gain 1 more. Defense dice cancel attacks. On a critical, the defender chooses what is cancelled. The second tank fires, but it is stationary, so it gets to reroll all attack dice, getting 2 crits and 2 hits. The attack is within the measuring stick. The attack is at close range, so the defender loses 1 die. The attack is at close range, so the defender loses 1 defense die. With only 2 defense die, they take 1 more damage and a critical. This does a total of 4 damage to the tank, and it is destroyed. Some critical damage can be repaired at the end of each round. Keep playing until 1 player wins the scenario. Why would you like this game? World of Tanks is unlike most World War II miniature games. It's fast to play and easy to learn. The system itself is interesting, and its focus on mobility for survival is intriguing. We only played it with medium tanks, and I'm interested to see how the different tank classes and tank destroyers shake it up. The critical hits add a little bit of uncertainty. The critical hits add a little bit of uncertainty to taking damage and can force you to change your approach, covering a tank while it repairs. There are tons of upgrades in the game, and this will lead to a lot of plotting and thinking about what makes up the best 200-point list. The best thing about this game is it's a historic miniatures war game that's easy to learn. These are rare. However, while the game is fun enough with the starter tanks, it really shines at the 200-point limit. With squads of 5 or so tanks. So if you get into it, be prepared to get more than the starter box. These are the planned releases for the game. And of course, this is a game about a real war, which is a theme that won't appeal to everyone. This game uses the same models used in Flames of War. And if you like the ideas but want sci-fi, try X-Wing. World of Tanks. It's X-Wing, but tanks. If you enjoyed this video, hit the notification button, subscribe to the channel, and come support us on Patreon. Yeah, that's the audio. That's kind of done. Like, the awkward thing is I'm recording this here and there, so in order for me to show you how I edit this, I kind of have to stop these things and save all the files. So I'm just going to go do that now, and we'll be back with audio editing in a little bit. We're going to open the file in Adobe Audition. And well, you can see where like I started doing my shouting thing versus where I was talking normally. So we're just gonna scrub all that out of here. And yeah, this shows up in big waveform. So, oh, I might not have remembered to turn down the gain. So this could be quite a hero. Kia ora koutou and welcome. Yeah, there we go. Okay. So we have all the space at the front of the video, which is just background noise. So what I'm going to do is just highlight a section of that. We'll go to Effects. We will capture a noise print. And then we'll highlight the entire audio file. And then we will go to Noise Reduction Process. And what this will do is it will remove the fan sound from my computer, any background hisses and other bits and pieces. And we'll just trim right down to the start of the track. Unless it crashes. No, there it goes. So what we got here is, I'll clear out the bits at the back. The awkward thing is I'm recording. So we'll just clear that off. And that leaves us with nearly 6 minutes of raw audio. So what I tend to do is just go through and reduce the amount of dead air. 3 minutes. So I do talk quite fast, but I don't... I still have to breathe. The videos, I don't breathe.
Review copy used. There is no solo mode. It's a game for 2 players. Playing time is medium, and it's a pretty simple game. Commander in this conflict. You are a tank commander in this. You are.
Also take out breaths.
You are a tank commander in this conflict, leading a squadron of tanks into battle. Can you maneuver your... Leading a squadron of tanks into battle. Can you maneuver your forces... Can you maneuver your forces into position and deliver a decisive blow to your opponents? The winner of this game is determined by what scenario you are playing.
Again, I took a breath. I took a wait there and took a drink, and we'll just cut that out because there's no need to have it.
The winner of this game is determined by what scenario you are playing. It can be eliminating the other players. It can be eliminating the other player's tanks or capturing and holding objectives.
So we also delete the errors there.
It can be eliminating the other player's tanks or capturing and holding objectives. Asymmetry. Each tank has different abilities, strengths, and weaknesses. Tank has different abilities, strengths, and weaknesses.
So this is a relatively time-consuming process, so I'm going to put this on like hyper fast forward, and I'm just going to do all the other cuts. I think you got the idea of what I'm doing here. It's reducing dead air, it's cutting out breaths, and it's just compressing it. It's a very snippy manual process. I'll be back when we've actually got closer to a finished track.
And if you like the ideas but want sci-fi, try X-Wing. World of Tanks. It's X-Wing, but tanks. World of Tanks. It's X-Wing, but tanks. If you enjoyed this video,
hit the notification button, subscribe to the channel, and come support us on. Hit the notification button, subscribe to the channel, and come support us on Patreon. Alright, so after all of that, we're down to 3 minutes 25 of time, which means this video is going to be around about 3:37 long or so, maybe a little bit longer, 3:40, because we've got to put the stinger at the front, the intro and the outro, and those take up nearly 20 seconds. So this is almost like a normal length 3 minute board games video. It's, you know, just a shade over 3 minutes of actual content, and then we've got the little padding at the end, but it's still under 4 minutes. So the last thing I tend to do once we've trimmed everything down is to highlight it all, go to effects and pop into amplitude and compression and go to the tube modeled compressor. And I have this set to these settings, which are shown on the screen. And what this does is it eliminates a lot of the peaks and troughs. So this means that there'll be very little big loud things, and each video is a consistent volume. And that's something I really like to keep, because if you've got a different volume between videos, people will listen to one, it'll be really quiet, and they'll turn it up, and then they'll get to the loud video and you'll burst their eardrums, and no one wants that. So this is something I've been doing for the last wee while to make sure that the videos are consistent. And once that's done, that is the audio. That is the audio locked and loaded. So I just save that and export it. And that's the audio thing. The next thing we have to do, well, aside from getting the cover for the game off Stephanie, is actually start doing the video editing. Exciting. We'll pick that up later. Alright, so once we've done the photos and the audio, the next thing to do is assemble the video in Premiere Pro. Premiere Pro is the software I use. It's part of the Adobe Creative Suite, which I understand is not the cheapest thing, but I've been paying for it for so long I kind of forgotten how much it costs. So it's just a necessary part of doing the channel now. And we head to the assembly tab, first of all. So here we're going to import all of the files we need to make this video, and of course it's going to jump to where we were previously. But we'll start, the way I go about importing things is I go about doing it in the same sequence each time. So it's how I think stuff's going to flow through the video. So we start off, of course, with the stinger. Load that in there and put that down there straight away, because that's always at the start of the video. Then we move to our 2020 revamp, and we grab our intro and outro graphics. Of course, those are the next things that go down there. Then back out, we go to game specific items, and this brings up our folder, which has all of our wonderful covers that Stephanie's done over the years, and graphics, and we put that in there. And of course, oh, actually we just need to shorten this down to around 6 seconds. Yeah. And we'll just bung that one in there. Then we go back to here and we look in our mechanics folder and we try to remember the mechanics that we said the game had. So it's competitive, asymmetric, dice rolling, and points. Not victory points. I don't really have a points icon here, so I guess we're going to use that one. Not ideal. Then to our essentials. So there's no solo mode, complexity 2, playing times, and 2 players, and all that stuff gets brought in there. We then import from the working folder all of the pictures and the audio clipping. I will need to during editing this video have to jump out and grab some other pictures that might need to supplement the stuff, but that's essentially the core of the videos files just put there. And we put in the audio file right there. And it's about now I tend to think about what music's going to go on the thing. So we go back to our main folder, and here's a music shortcut, and here's all the music that I've got from Incompetech over the years. Now that's a Collective Commons free use thing. As long as you cite it, you can use it, and the music's pretty damn good. Not entirely too sure what I'm going to use here, so I'm going to sample some of these things, and we'll come back to this when I've decided on a piece of music. Also import some basic things that we tend to use quite frequently: our default green arrow, our default red line, and our default "this was a review copy" box. They're just clip art, nothing more than that. Alright, now the files are in here. The first phase is the assembly, and that's where I listen along to the video, the audio track, and I just sync things up without editing, without resizing, without scaling. It's just an arrangement so things are in the right sequence. But first I need to change the audio levels because that music's going to be absolutely deafening. So drop that down to -30.
Kia ora koutou and welcome to World of Tanks in about 3 minutes.
Alright, back to assembly. And here I go.
Review copy used. There is no solo mode. It's a game for two. Players, playing time is medium, and it's a pretty simple game. It's World War.
There's actually a bit of a pause there, which is unusual. Overview.
Conflict, leading a squadron of tanks into battle. Can you maneuver your forces into position and deliver a decisive blow to your opponents?
Alright, so we're doing the intro now, and this has to be a prescribed length of time. It's over the narration of the setting stuff, and we will just lay in the different photos that make up that intro, and leave the last one long so we can do a bit of a pan.
The winner of this game.
So it's really weird doing this with a camera here because I'm so used to just getting in the zone and not talking to anyone for like an hour and a half, 2 hours to do this. So I probably should be talking to you more than what I'm doing, but it's just, this is the process. It's quiet work.
It's player turn.
So here I'm putting up these small cards above there, and I'm going to trim them out later, just so they've got the initiative score sitting in the corner. So it's not, this photo's not going to entirely sit over the top of this one. Just grabbing some additional images. So I'll just save this one in the core folder. There we go. While we're here, we might as well get cover image to X-Wing. And the cover to Flames of War. Because we're using those later in the video. Alright.
Tanks.
One of the reasons I'm adding these things on a different line than I am these ones is these photos and they're prescribed size and they don't quite fit the screen properly. So I tend to... Oh, that's not a really good example. You can see the edges there. I tend to have to crop and move the photos around. So I leave them all on the same line because they need the same basic crop to make them acceptable.
Thanks. If you enjoyed this video, hit the notification button, subscribe to the channel, and come support us on Patreon.
Alright, so that is the basic assembly done. So that's everything kind of in sequence for the most part. And so we then move on to reframing all of the photos so they vaguely fit. So this is a pretty simple process really. It's 117%. I used to do this manually for every picture. That took a while. Now Stephanie told me how to do this, which is, there we go. So all of these photos are now going to be basically zoomed in, and I'll tweak and change them one by one. Now that framing is done, we go back to the start of the video and I'll just shorten that down a smidge. We then go to the effects panel and we start doing all of the stop motion photography stuff. We'll start doing the editing and tweaking. So again, this used to take a lot longer than it does now because I've kind of, well, after doing nearly 200 videos like this, you learn shortcuts and you just learn to semi-automate the process in your brain.
Kia ora koutou and welcome to World of Tanks in about 3 minutes. Review copy used. There is no solo mode. It's
So here's a good example of the old...
It's a game for 2 players, playing time is medium, and it's
a
pretty simple game. It's World War II, the largest and most devastating war in human...
Human history. You are a tank commander in this conflict, leading a squadron of tanks into battle. Can you maneuver your forces into position and deliver a decisive blow to your opponents? The winner. These things like that, I knew exactly that that is 200, 235. That's the size they all go to. So there's no need to resize it. I just know that that's the size it's supposed to be. And here's where we start getting a little fiddly sometimes. Trying to get that there, that's nice clean, that's nice and clean. Sometimes you just, with the camera's like slightly different angle, you can't get things to line up. But if you can, it just looks a lot nicer when, even though that image is slightly misaligned, because when I placed the cards down, I must have slightly bumped the tank or the camera. Even very slightly. You can fix that up in post if it's got the right parallax and it still works. Each tank and upgrade has a points cost, and the game has a points limit. Dice. Conflict resolution. And yeah, I'm using the same photo of dice for two things in the video. It's not really that big a deal. Aha! Now, here's a good example of where I, after arranging things, realize I can do something slightly better. So we're going to try and find our trusty friend, Mr. Green Arrow. And minus 320. Oops, wrong side. Wrong thingy. No, 320. That way, so there we go. And I think I'll just put in plaque writing, thanks. Yeah, plaque writing. Yeah. Oh, that needs to be a bit more visible. Bold. Scale. So it's that one. I should be able to tell by the rotation. It's the only one. Alright. Okay, so that means we've used the same photo, but we've used it for different purposes, and this one's a lot more informative. It's 3 dice for advantage. The winner is the player with the most critical symbols. Advantage means you win ties on this round. Movement is first. So here we're just doing a simple mask. We're taking that picture, we're turning it into much of a square as we can, and then we will reposition that. So it just kind of sits up there. With the tanks with the lowest initiative moving first. Actually, that's a terrible side to put it on because we're moving through that forest and ending up on that side. So we'll just rejig that over there. A tank moves by placing the measuring stick against the tank, and then replacing the tank so it is touching the stick flat. You can position the tank on any side as long as it's touching. And we do the same thing here. We get the statistic we needed. We put it up here. Do this as many times as your tank's mobility score. Place a marker to show how many times you place a marker. Then we want to dip to black here. Because we're going to do a sharp zoom in here. So we get here, boop, boop. Up to there, boop, boop. And this is to try and make it as unambiguous as possible what we're actually talking about. As many times as your tank's mobility score. Place a marker to show many times as your tank's mobility score. Place a marker to show how many times you have moved. How many times you have moved. Next is the shooting phase. Well, let's just reuse that. Oh, why are you going to be like this? Yeah, best attributes. Boom. Next is the shooting phase, and the tanks with the higher initiative shoot first. Tanks can shoot at anything on the board they can see. Yeah, I might put 2 examples in there just because reduce ambiguity on what I'm talking about. So yeah, I'll go for 70 for that one. Rotation. Actually. Block line of sight, so these 2 tanks cannot see each other. Woods, hills, walls, and buildings provide cover. and its focus on mobility for survival is intriguing. We only played it with medium tanks.
Really starting. Things really starting to piss me off.
We only played it with medium tanks, and I'm interested to see how the different tank classes and tank destroyers shake it up. The critical hits add a little. Add a little bit of uncertainty to taking damage and can force you to change your approach, covering a tank while it repairs. There are tons of upgrades. In the game, and this will lead to a lot of plotting and thinking about what makes up the best 200-point list. The best thing about this game is of 5 or so tanks. Really shines at the 200. However, while this game is This game is fun enough with the starter tanks. It really shines at the 200-point limit, with squads of 5 or so tanks. So if you get into it, be prepared to get more than the starter box. These are the planned releases for the game. And of course, this is a game about a real war, which is a theme that won't appeal to everyone. This game uses the same models used in Flames of War. And if you like the ideas but want sci-fi, try X-Wing. World of Tanks. It's X-Wing, but tanks. If you enjoyed this video, hit the notification button, subscribe to the channel, and come support us on Patreon.
So we are nearly done the editing, which is pretty good. And then thanks. Always make the music fade out if I remember, although in one video I accidentally put it up at the end and it's really weird. So if you've noticed that on one of the videos, instead of the music fading out, it gets really loud at the end, and I didn't notice. Which is
the difference between minus 20 decibels and 20 decibels. The the not so interesting thing about this video is there's no 3D shots, there's no audio editing that I've done that requires me to do funky voices or sound effects and stuff like that. It's very much a standard sort of 3-minute board games video, except for the fact that the photo shoot wasn't done in my normal controlled environment. That's the weird thing about this one. But for the most part, this part of the process is the video editing process was very, very standard. So the last thing I do is watch the damn thing. And I watch the damn thing a couple of times, and invariably I find something that isn't animating or isn't working, and I have to go back and fix that. So I'm just going to do that now, but I'll stop recording. So I'll be back with the conclusions in a little bit. Because I'm not going to show you like the uploading to YouTube process. I think we're kind of at the end of the video creation process now, so I'll just tell you about the last couple of bits with the conclusion. Nah, I'm just rambling at the moment. So yeah, that's kind of the end of video creation, and from here, once I've done so that's kind of the end of creating the video. The last thing I do is watch it through a couple of times to try and find little errors and correct them, and from there I just export the file and upload it to YouTube. And I'll be back in a second with the conclusions to this behind-the-scenes documentary.
And that concludes the behind-the-scenes documentary for 3-minute board games. Yeah, there's a lot going on in that video, and I find it quite hard to actually talk to the camera while working because my process is so focused on getting the job done, just getting in the zone, editing away, and having to think about that and talk about that while I'm doing it's actually really alien. I like to just be left alone. If there are any further comments or questions you've got about any parts of the process, just let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, hit the notification button, subscribe to the channel, and come support us on Patreon. Thank you.